Welcome back to here at Goldberg. Today we'll be talking about Karmelo culture. And this has been in the news. Well, I wouldn't say the news, mainly social media, which is one of the reasons why a number of people have been going, oh, it's going to be a helter-skelter event. They always do this. But then there's others that go, no, they're trying to foment a struggle to take away our Second Amendment rights. It's like, that's even funnier because the Second Amendment has been infringed since at least FDR, and these people are always LARPing. I've said before, it's more effective for them to have the Second Amendment in place because it persuades all these paranoid, delusional right-wingers that they actually have power, when in reality, they'd probably roll over if anyone showed up at their door. As the story goes, there was a track meet. The brother was under a tent, and the white kid said, "You're not supposed to be here." There's an altercation, and the white dude got stabbed in the chest and died. From what I've seen, as far as the police report goes, it was definitely not self-defense, although many in the community are claiming it, in fact, was. And perhaps that's an indictment of soy liberalism because the idea holds that we're supposed to just hear the facts and you make that judgment. Perhaps a larger proportion of the cream cheese population had that view when it came to Chauvin or the Boogaloo Boys in Georgia, the McMichaels, although part of that could have just been because of cultural pressure. And obviously, those stories were getting far more attention in the mainstream than this one. I would suggest to you that the younger white generations are far more aware on a level that many black people may be seeing things through the lens of race. We definitely need to talk about the concept of white privilege because I believe it exists, but not in the way that others conceive. You see, a lot of cream cheese types make the assumption that this form of benevolent paternalism or white saviorism is going to be welcomed. That you can appeal to the better nature of these POC types. You can do the Coach LFA routine. Hey, bro, let's talk it out. Take a knee. And you do your recriminations back and forth, and there's a bro hug, and everyone leaves happy. I suspect this Austin kid, decent looking, he's athletic, probably had something of an aura around him where he can have that effect on others, and he assumes the same will play out. At worst, what's going to happen? They're going to get down and wrestle, kind of like Kanye did with his cousin. But you are not on the same wavelength. Realistically speaking, if someone's prepared to stab another over a bad name or being disrespected or something minor that you'd maybe swing a few punches, you can't negotiate, right? Remember that liberal guy in New York a couple years back? He was with his communist Hispanic girlfriend waiting for an Uber or a bus, and the brother was spurting out on the sidewalk. He's like, "Hey, let's come on, calm down. It's gonna be fine." He got knifed. By the way, folks, if you think someone might have a knife or they draw a knife, I was just recently talking to a couple of retired cops. They said, "Get the hell away. Preferably have a gun, but put distance between the two of you because a knife wound, even if it's in a supposedly non-critical area, will kill you a lot faster than even some gunshots, strangely enough." And a lot of people watch movies and think, oh, I'm going to do some karate move. At the very least, you're probably getting your arm slashed up, but there's a good chance you're dead. So don't play around with knives. That's my piece of advice. A part of me, I think it's tragedy because my side hustle, I work with a lot of middle class black people, and no, they're not going to draw a knife on you because you bumped into them or something stupid. They actually have impulse control. I don't like putting everyone in the same box, even though maybe you'd say those folks would be supportive secretly of someone like Carmelo Anthony. I'm stating it because that's my experience. It's not like some attempt to virtue signal because it's not winning me any points one way or the other. But with that being said, I know this is going to be a angry type of picture. The books 10,000 Year Explosion and The Troublesome Inheritance, they both make the claim that some people of African descent carry a gene which may enhance their propensity towards aggression. Now, there's also the dynamic where when they would reproduce some of the slaves in the US, they might take the most masculine men and women because they wanted the strongest specimens. So could that also play a role? See, that's the whole dynamic. oh, testosterone levels are falling. We need to boost testosterone. Well, it's not guaranteed, but higher testosterone can lead to propensity for violence in some cases. I would say I've seen this with the world eternal, though. And someone's going, well, Goldberg, there's no actual evidence for macroevolution. Well, yeah, you just have to look at people and pay attention to their behavior. You don't have to have some nuanced theory or whatever it comes down to. Because I've seen it with some African descent population. I've seen it with some Euros. Like, there are some weird looking Dutch people, and definitely Portuguese. Many look like back in the day their great great grandmother was bedding down with a kookaburra or maybe one of Tim Treadwell's friends. Just saying. Obviously, the Middle East, South Asia, not so much East Asia that I've encountered, but perhaps it does exist. Hell, I can't remove myself from contention because back when I worked retail, we were in the little register section of our department, and there was a dude from South Asia, but not from India, one of the better South Asian countries. And this one dude who he had been a blue collar worker, but then his wife turned him into a stay at home dad. And I think his daughter became trans or something, but he was a big liberal. And the guy from South Asia looks to me and he says, ah, you have ears like monkey. And I was like, well, that's pretty rich coming from you because you were born in the land of the ma. And the liberal guy goes, don't you say it. So it'll exist to some extent. I don't know what to tell you. Of course, people will go, how do you solve this problem of that subset of the population that they're not going to be able to wrangle with modernity, no matter what? You just saw that brawl on the Carnival cruise lines. That's not normal behavior over minor disagreements, but it happens. And so they go, well, you can remove them to the motherland. The problem with that is that these African countries don't have the money to prop them up. So they're either going to starve or the Africans are going to, put them to the machete. And probably the most incendiary, racist things I've heard about American black people have come from Africans, so I wouldn't put it past them. The alternative, the most humane, seems to be to place them on reservations in the United States. And again, the ones that are actually this way, and not talking about the middle class people. But they're, are you okay with that outcome? Because these coaches, oh, remigration, this, that, the other. A lot of these right wingers act like there's some kind of Einsatzgruppen and leader, but you have to wonder, are they just pushing this to get clicks online? They have no skin in the game whatsoever. Like many of them have actually been unmasked and they're not even American. They're like from India and they're pretending to be some base nationalists. So, yeah, that's a complicated question to say the least, but on a long enough timeline, I just don't see how a country is going to be able to advance when you have this subset that is so socially disagreeable. So you're going to have to, whatever, put them on reservations or, I mean, the liberals say increase funding for education and job training. The conservatives say teach them about free markets and being a Trump cell. I don't know. I think either of those probably are bound to fail, but you let me know. I could be off the mark. But who cares about all that? I wanted to use this video as an excuse to talk about a subject that I've been meaning to mention in the past. So if you ask your typical cohort of Wignats, they'll tell you, people like myself, we have the statistical agenda to promote certain couplings and commercials in the media so we can dumb down society and fob everyone off with Nikes and Hennessy. And indeed, to an extent, it's rare for you to see a realistic portrayal of a black male in the mainstream. It's typically super athletic, desired by all the women, high IQ, but also progressive feminists, not a misogynist in any shape whatsoever. The only place you'll see compelling portrayals of black people will be in black media at this point. The Tyler Perry stuff, this show Greenleaf is actually pretty good. I watched at least one season of that. Now, I will say that since George Floyd, I've noticed more of them placing normie white dudes with sisters in commercials and even some shows. Now, that's perhaps just a normal byproduct of this whole trend, but I also picked up on the fact that they tend to put these very butch black women. So, the Conjuring 3, if I'm not mistaken, he goes to college and he meets this lesbian black chick and starts dating her. And it's like, come on, he would get a feminine middle class black woman, not a Shaniqua, just saying. There's exceptions like the Sonic movie, Tika Sumter, but apparently a lot of sissy black Manassyrians got angry over that couple, him and was it Scott Marsden or something like that. Recently, I watched the Wicked movie. Yes, I know. And I say watched, I fast forwarded through it because it was terrible. But they were trying to make us believe that the main witch girl was getting the attention of the Chad. And I'm like, look, it's not the fact that she's black, it's that that particular girl, Cynthia, whatever, has got an extremely repugnant face on screen, especially in green makeup. I would be looking at her, she's got the big teeth and nose, and I'm like, come on. If she's a good singer, then put like a Tika Sumpter and Natalie Emmanuel and have her dub it because it's important to have characters on screen that are easy on the eyes. That's kind of the point. But these producers are just like, it's the whole Jar Jar Binks phenomenon. I blame George Lucas for this. He's like, oh, well, screw you for not accepting me. Gungans? I thought they're called Gungas. What are you going to do? But that is the take of the Wignats. Now, there's a subset of the Communita where they claim, no, it's quite the opposite. The reason why they put all these couplings is because they're trying to erase visibly looking black people and replace them with this meeksification strategy, where you have black people with their lighter skin, they've got blue or green eyes, they're less threatening to the white gaze. And so maybe a year or so back, I was on a Hallmark film binge. Not that, again, I seriously watched them, but it's more like, white noise. And this is one that stood out, a Fashionably Yours, Cat Graham, and this guy who's like a brother version of Paul Walker. Perhaps that's what they're going for. They want this idea. That's the representative of black people on screen. I think it's an interesting contrast of sorts that we can kind of hash out. And you may say, well, but that's not true. Actually, there's some historical basis for this, strangely enough. So we'll get into it. After the slave uprising in Haiti, which shook the world to a great extent because a lot of these French people were put to the sword, there was concern not just in the United States, but also in Brazil, because Brazil imported, I believe, the highest number of slaves, period, in the New World. And they were going, if we have all these people and they develop some kind of political identity, that's a problem. The first solution was to import the high Europeans, Scandinavians and Germans in particular, but they would bring them to the plantation and they would treat them just about as bad as the slaves. As such, European authorities started saying, no, you're not going to take those populations. And the ones that would end up coming were from poorer nations such as Spain, Portugal, Italy, and even Syria and Lebanon. Well, that helps to an extent, but it's still not adequate. It doesn't put you in the position of the United States where you have a clear delineation, distinction between the groups. And as such, they began a process where they went to these Marios and Akims and they said, you need to start tapping these West African onion booties. And what would happen is the offspring of those unions, they didn't have the ability to, let's say, run the entire government department, but they could have a relatively decent mid-level position. In the military, they could be non-com officers, not the full-fledged commission, but they also wouldn't be stuck like the Africans at the very bottom. And it was a process of essentially dividing and conquering, because now you have this group of people who are aspiring to be members of the elite based upon how much resources they accrue and who they marry. And it undermines the ability of all these to say we have one Afro-Brazilian identity. As such, you really haven't had a clear-cut civil rights movement in Brazil on the level of the United States. And to this day, Afro-Brazilians tend to be on the poor side, live in the favelas, and you want to talk about police brutality, you definitely see that in Brazil. To give you an example of this, this is, I believe, Ronaldinho, one of the footballers. He said in an interview that he identifies as white. Now, most people in the U.S. would say this dude is Hispanic, maybe even a brother. His father was really pissed off because they know you are of African descent, but it shows you how those social norms can operate. In fact, when Michel Temer became president of Brazil, all the media was going, oh, it's a cabinet full of white men. You look at these white men and you're like, really? They all look like Arabs. But that's how these class structures emerged in South America. And even with the Spanish, like when the first Spaniards arrived, many of them didn't want to get with the Indian women. They were requesting that Spanish women be sent over, and it had to be like a real push on the part of the Catholic Church and the governments to get them to start bedding down with the indigenous. I suspect something similar would have occurred even if the South had won the Civil War, because you make the claim they would have sent them back, but that's actually costly. Slavery in the first place was introduced to prevent the poor white people from organizing and getting higher wages. But even if you legalize slavery, as the South would have inevitably had to do, you can pay the blacks less. And that was one of the benefits, even the Great Migrations, one of the reasons they brought them in is because they could actually dole out lower wages. You see how this kind of germinated. Now, early stages of the United States history, there were French Catholic leaders who were huge advocates of mixing. They said it was going to create a stronger diversity society. Not saying that that's common with Catholics at all. As we know, the Catholic Church has not been pushing that throughout history and doesn't continue to push that. Absolutely not. In the case of Louisiana, New Orleans, there was a shortage of women, and they did try to bring some over. There's a whole legend about how some of these women committed suicide or were killed, and their ghosts haunt the region. But a number of men started actually taking the mixed women or even some black women and marrying them, like upper class men. That's where you develop this strange system, the quadroons, the octoroons, and all that, where your status was based upon your overall blood position. So it can happen, if nothing else, from a position of practicality, much like you see all these wignats who complain about diversity and then, they switch off the computer and they're sitting there with their jungle Asian wife. Um, I don't know what to tell you. It's just really interesting to see how human history has played out. But let me know what you think. Do you believe the wignats are correct as far as the Care Bear agenda? Are these people in the community correct? Maybe they're both wrong. And what do you think about the Carmelo Anthony case? Is it a question where it's more of the nurture, you need better education, more funding? Is it nature? Is it something that can be dealt with by just getting people to, smoke the peace pipe and do a bro hug? Or are we going to need a more significant solution, socially speaking? Let's discuss.